Hello and welcome to Soul Guide Society, where we take you on a journey of self-discovery as we explore a wide range of topics from the basics of astrology and energy work to deeper mysteries of consciousness and spirituality. My name is Pathway Light by Corey.
And my name is Larina Alliance, and through our insightful discussions and practical exercises, we aim to demystify these concepts and empower you to integrate them into your daily life for greater awareness, healing, and personal growth.
And as a disclaimer, unless otherwise stated, no one on this podcast is a medical, legal, or financial professional, and content discussed should not be taken as a replacement for medical, legal, or financial professional advice.
I wanted to talk about the weird intuitive knowing that I was not good at my job. Like, I was not gonna stay at my last job, because those moments of, hey, you really don't like it here, and look, it's getting worse, were so loud, but yet I would still like completely ignore them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that it wasn't until I knew that they weren't going to take care of me when I went on PTO at my sales job, because I went on PTO. There was a lot going on. I went on PTO because I was overwhelmed. I was burned out. I'd been working for 12 hours for like 7 days a week.
Oh, wow.
And, or 6 days. Okay. They gave me my Sundays. But like, that's not any better. Okay.
It's not.
Um, and I was like, I'm going on PTO and I don't want to come back. And I'm like, I don't know. I was telling myself I don't want to come back. And they were like, go on PTO, see how you feel. And I told my boss, like, don't worry about moving me to a new store. I don't want to go to a new store. I would like you to fire me. like straight up. Like, I straight up told him. And he was like, okay, got you. And like, pattern recognition, I kind of knew that I know what I said, like I know what I told him to do, you know, but
Yeah.
pattern recognition and just knowing, just my intuition, just my gut instinct. Halfway through that PTO, I was like, they're going to do something else. Like, they're going to do something I don't want. And I'm probably going to have my job still when I come back.
Even though I don't want it.
Even though I don't want it. And I literally said, the thing that really, like, the thing that came out of my mouth before I went into it was, do not move me to another store. Like, and that, there was no reason for me to say that. There was no reason for them to move me, or anything, but that's what I said. And when I came back, the very first thing they did was put me in a meeting to tell me they were moving me into my old store. And it took me a second to put it together, but, they're just doing that because, they didn't want to have to fire me. Right. But I knew that. Like, I knew that it was coming. I knew, and in the moment that they told me, I literally said I knew it. And it was like and it wasn't just I knew it because of PTO. I knew it because I had been telling myself I did not want to be here. I do not want to go anywhere. It's time for you to go.
Yeah.
And I just hadn't been answering. And so in that moment, I was like, no, I'm not in a new store. I'm just going to leave.
Yeah.
It was a gut instinct on top of just knowing, like, just knowing, like, this is not the place for you, and you've been telling yourself this, and you've been hearing yourself say this over and over and over again, and you've been ignoring it, and so it's just going to keep getting louder until you don't ignore it anymore. It wasn't anxiety inducing or anything like that. It was just, hey, you're ready to go, what the hell.
Yeah, I had a similar issue when I was working at the dispensary, when I was working at the grow facility for
Right.
the marijuana facilities.
Yeah.
I knew I needed to leave. It was not good for my physical health, it was not good for my mental health, it was not good for any of my healths. And
Yeah.
when you brought concerns to them, you were met with our standards are appropriate. We don't have levels that would indicate any harm, or we don't have levels that would indicate any mold or any mildew whatsoever.
Yeah.
Despite me having an allergic
Reacting.
reaction to
Yeah.
said things.
I remember you
Um,
telling me that. Yeah.
yeah, so it's funny when I officially gave in, I was like, you know what, this is my 3 week notice. I gave them a 3 week notice. They had a room on record that gave me migraines. They knew that room gave me migraines. And I had a feeling, anyways, that once I gave my notice, they were going to try and either just let me go immediately or they were going to retaliate because management was toxic. So I gave my notice, and within an hour, I was told that the remainder of my 3 weeks I would be spending in the very room that would give me migraines.
Yo.
I said, okay. And I walked out of the room like I was going to head to the place. And I instead walked straight up to HR, put my badge on the desk, and I said, you guys are retaliatory, and you're lucky I don't take legal action. And I walked out.
Yeah.
Because I just need at that point I needed to protect myself. But if I had listened to my instinct months prior, I wouldn't even have gotten the job. I would have known that that wasn't where I was supposed to be. That was not
Yeah.
where I needed to be. That was not me. And on the other hand, when we're talking about instinct, it can also be extremely beneficial, not towards warning you of things, but towards just giving you general knowledge, right? Like with animals, I have 5 animals. I've got 2 birds, 2 cats, and a dog. None of those beings can speak to me. Absolutely none of them.
Nope.
What I do know is when my dog looks at me a certain way, that means he's got to go outside or I'm going to have a problem on my hands on the inside.
Yeah. I think
Right?
to a certain extent, yeah, I could see that. Like our animals, our intuition immediately knows what our animal needs.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially like with my birds. These guys, like, they don't have like body language like a dog does. They do have body language, but it's different than like a dog or a cat. When I was first learning about them, it's very, very, very different. Like they'll spread their wings back when they're happy to see you. They do this little like side waddle when they're
Yeah.
happy. I thought that one of my birds had an injured foot because she kept lifting her foot. But again, this was an instinct thing where I was like, I don't nothing like it doesn't feel like it's wrong. She's not
Yeah.
limping around. She's not
Yeah.
displaying any signs of discomfort. This feels normal. When I looked it up, it actually means content. It means
Yeah.
content when they can
Hmm.
when they feel comfortable enough to just perch on one leg. That means they're happy and content. So
Yeah.
it was very unique.
Yeah. And I think when we think about intuition and just like knowing things, I think a really big part of intuition, especially coming from not just the spiritual side, but the psychological side of it, is knowing that intuition is subconsciously pattern recognition. Like intuition is just knowing, it is very spiritual and we'll get into that, right? But it's also knowing that your mind is going through these patterns that you've seen before and saying, "Oh, that's what that is."
Yes.
And here's your answer before you even ask the question.
Yeah. And it's a subconscious thing. It's not a conscious thought. And I think that's
No.
where people can often get your
Confused,
intuition a little bit
mixed up.
confused because they look at and they feel their intuition, but then immediately following that intuition is the conscious thought. A good analogy that I always give for this, right? I don't know if I want chicken tenders or if I want a burger. You choose for me. You want chicken tenders. No, I want a burger. You knew that answer, but you're asking because you need reassurance.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And that goes to like our favorite thing to say, trust yourself,
Yes.
right? We love asking people for confirmation on what we just thought. But I think even like me now, it took me a long, 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 long time, and I still do it even to this day, but not as much, to just listen to that soft thought, to just say, my I already know. This isn't that bad. Like with everything going on in, we're not getting political, but like just in the world in general, right? I've always had the, oh my god, what's happening? What's going on, and getting really anxious. And one time I just had the, it's not happening to you right now. And there are so many things that you can do about this. Take a second and breathe. You're
Yes.
going to be okay in the current future, in the close future,
Yeah.
right? This is not the time to panic.
Yeah.
And, that was, I want to say, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I'm fine, So, and I finally listened to it, right? But to even go into just directly intuition and its definition, I think is super important, just so
Yeah.
that we know what it is. Because we say intuition, but I'm sure people will come and say, well, that's pattern recognition. And those two aren't necessarily different. There's more to intuition, you know?
I feel like we've said it every episode, but why not both?
Yeah,
That needs to be our like slogan, but we need to put it on a
we
t-shirt.
gotta like 3, 2, 1. Why not both?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no. Intuition, so I have the definition in front of me. It's the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. It more often than not doesn't need proof. And you were just saying, like, before the intuition or no, when the intuition comes, it comes, and then you have the questioning thought after.
Yes.
Intuition will come to you and tell you exactly what's happening. Like, it'll tell you the sky is blue, and you, as a human being, especially with everything that a lot of us may have been through, will go, well, is it blue, or is my left eye just seeing incorrectly?
I'm not kidding. I have actually gone through a point in my brain where I was like, the sky is blue, but it's only blue because of the reflection off of the water. And if the water was any different color, then it wouldn't actually be that. So technically, the sky isn't blue, the sky is a reflection. So my brain has taken me beyond what needs to be talked about in certain situations so that I can avoid my intuition. And I
Yeah.
say that as a greater analogy because I have had situations where literally I was being like really cheated on to the max. Like you're talking
Mhm.
about cheated on, played, bamboozled, finagled,
Mhm.
situationship, however you want to claim
Yeah.
that.
Take the trauma,
Um,
y'all.
yeah. um, whatever, however you want to call it, it was bad.
Mhm.
And I mean, it got to a point where he had gotten a text from someone named Babe that said, I miss you. And he said, oh,
Mm.
that's my ex that I never changed the name of. My
What?
intuition, my instincts, my common sense
Yeah.
told me that that's bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
What, like, he's obviously, I'm getting played right now, but what I wanted
Yes.
was for what he said to be true.
Yes.
So I ignored my intuition. So
Yes. What you
oftentimes our
wanted was,
intuition can scream, but
yeah.
we still ignore it.
Yeah. What you wanted was more important than what your intuition was telling you.
Yes.
And that we run into that quite often. You're not alone, friend. Same. Like, quite different issues, but same ending. Uh, Toxic, cheating, clearly doing things that they're not supposed to, significant other of mine, ex significant other of mine. Um, and I knew it, and I felt it, and I could tell, but what I wanted was for that not to be true, and for what
Yes.
they were saying to be true. And so I did not listen, and I denied my intuition. And so later in life we find that because we're denying what we already know, it gets harder to listen to ourselves,
Yes.
right? I think we run into that a lot.
We start to question ourselves.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do. And I think that's where our divide comes because I think as children, we trust our instincts very heavily. They
Yes.
say everybody says children are tapped in, children know things that, adults don't. But the reason why adults don't know that is because over time, those children have been programmed and trained and experienced to not trust that instinct. They have experiences that train them not to trust that instinct. And that goes when, they have a feeling about something and somebody tells them not to trust that feeling and something bad happens anyways. Whatever happens, they learn to suppress that.
Yeah. I I completely agree. I think that that is something that I've run into a lot, especially now. I I feel like I was lucky enough to learn about my intuition as a kid, to start doing chakra stuff, to start doing spiritual stuff, to start tapping into all of that, which for me, spirituality and psychology is the same thing, as we all know. I think I've said it a couple times on here. Um, I feel like growing up, I got the opportunity, right, to learn what intuition was immediately. Even if I didn't listen to it quite often, I knew that I could go back to listening to it because I had witnessed, I had recognized it, I met it. I met my intuition and trusted it at such a young age, you know? I do see it around me a lot. People have suppressed, they have so much suppressed that listening to themselves does not make sense,
Yeah.
right? To them, listening to their true feeling or that deep feeling is woke,
Yeah. I
according
mean,
to a lot of people, which woke I don't think is a bad thing, but like the way they use it now, right? Like,
but I feel like part of the reason is it essentially a lot of that suppression of the intuition comes from fear.
mhm.
And I see it all the time. I don't know if I've mentioned it on this podcast yet or not, but my day-to-day job, I work at a credit union. I'm a senior member service representative at a credit union.
Yeah,
And one of the biggest things that we've seen, at least recently, there's been a fairly large uptick in the attempted scams and the attempted fraud, where they will prey on people's fear. They will have them doubting their intuition so much and doubting their instincts so much that they will pull thousands of dollars out of their account and bring this money and give it to these people that they'll never see their money back again. And obviously, they don't know that they're doing this. They think that they're giving it to somebody
helping
for
out a family.
safekeeping.
Yeah,
They think that they're helping family. There's so many different scams that are out there. They think that they're bailing somebody out. They're paying medical expenses. There's so many different things that are out there. But the biggest thing that they rely upon, the scammers, is you not trusting your instincts.
yeah,
Because the moment that you trust your instincts, most people, when we get them in branch and we start hearing a lot of these cue words, we'll start to bring up a lot of these scams and we'll bring up the fear tactics and we'll bring up the common scams that are going around. And the response that we get to that was, I could tell something in my gut. It told me it wasn't right, but I should have listened to myself.
yeah,
And especially we hear that from the people that we weren't able to stop, because there comes a point where we have to give you your money. It is your
yeah,
money. So there comes a point where we can't say you can't have your money. So we have to give you your money. And if you lose it, at that point, there's really nothing that we can do. And there have been cases where people come back and they say, I should have listened to you guys. My gut told me to listen to you guys, but I was just so scared that what they were telling me was true. I was
yeah.
scared. And that's why fear, for in my perspective,
One of the biggest proponents. Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
to intuition suppression.
Yeah. I do agree. I do agree. And I think that's really important to know. Uh and to remember, a lot of the times our fear is so loud, anxiety is so loud that we don't listen, not just because we choose not to, but because listening would mean having to face and even maybe speak up for yourself or something else around you. And that is terrifying, especially if you could be wrong or you could hurt someone or anything like that.
Yep.
So we're here to kind of demystify the fear of intuition and what intuition is, explore its potential benefits, and provide practical tools for discerning it in our own lives and in your life. That was some of the experiences that we've gone through. But I think we should also kind of differentiate, right? What intuition can look like apart from other things. Because we get it mixed up, I think, sometimes with impulse,
Yes.
right? We get it. We were just talking about wishful thinking, right? We were talking about hoping that, you know, what our significant others that we loved at the time were saying was true, even though it was blatantly in our face that
Denial.
it wasn't. Denial is what that's called. Yes, absolutely. I think a really good one for me too is impulse, right? Impulse and intuition can be confused for each other quite often. I was talking about this recently with a lot of people, where we tend to do something that pushes us to not listen to ourselves. Like, it's often driven, and we have it here, but it's often driven by our emotions, or our, again, quite often our fears cause us to impulsively do something. I'm going to take me for example. I'm about to throw a little bit of my business out there, but when I was younger, I was one of those girls that was like, you know what? I'm going to go through my significant other's phone because I know he's cheating. Like, I know they're doing something against me and I need to know why. And I think that there are a lot of people who have gone through similar thoughts, um, uh, regarding that as well, and feeling as if that impulsive feeling based off of what you think is going on, is confused for intuition,
Yeah. And I think
quite often.
absolutely. And I think another thing that is also confused is instinct. And I think
Yeah.
that kind of goes along with that impulsivity because
Yeah.
instinct is your body's survival,
Yeah.
right? Your body is trying to survive. Instinct for me is more of a physical survival tactic
Mhm.
rather than a spiritual awareness tactic, which is where intuition comes from. So do you feel like what that gut feeling that you have, do you feel like that's coming from a sense of instinctual survival? Or do you feel like that's coming from a sense of intuitive knowing? And that's one of the biggest ways that I've been able to discern the two of them. And especially because in astrology, when we're looking at instinct versus intuition, we're looking at Mars versus the moon. Mars is our instinct, it's the action, it's that drive. Mars is the one that picks up the phone and searches through it. Mars is the
Yep.
one that, sits there and argues, and Mars is the one that, will bring about the fear and the anger and that instinctual reaction to either fight the situation or completely flee from it. Whereas the moon is the one that'll tell you exactly what's going on and the energies that have been there, you just haven't necessarily picked up on.
Yes. Can you remind me, Corey, what did we say the sacral chakra was? What planet?
The sacral, Mars.
Yes. And the sacral chakra is the chakra when it is unbalanced. It is the emotional chakra that will say, I feel insecure and I'm going to find out the truth immediately. Right? That is exactly what it does. When it is unbalanced, it is going to do everything to figure out what's wrong. So I agree. Right? And I love how that connected. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh, like more solidification. Solidification is not a word. I just made it up. Take it as it is. More, I am solidifying the last podcast, the last episode that we had where we talked about aligning the chakras with the planets, because that 1000% makes a lot of sense. That's where that comes from when I'm working with my clients. It's when they feel jealous. Jealousy is one of the biggest, jealous and then intuitive. Like jealous and then like not intuitive, I'm sorry, instinctual or impulsive comes from an unbalanced sacral chakra. And now we talk about like what is the root of that? What is the emotional connection to that? So I love that we just connected that. But I do want to agree with you in saying it is super important to discern that difference, right? It's super important to know what that instinct is compared to what that fear is. Is this a fear? Is this a trauma? Is this, what is this? I don't know exactly the words you use, but what is this emotion that is happening? Or is this an intuitive knowing, right? And I say that to say that a lot of the time in my personal experience, before I say in the collective understanding of intuition, in my personal experience, intuition has always been thought first before feeling. Whereas impulse or fear or anxiety or what I'm about to do because of how I feel is always because of how I feel first, right? I feel scared. I have racing thoughts about a specific situation. I'm just going to bring back up like going through someone's phone. I think all of those emotions that I'm feeling are intuition, but when you're having those feelings are what's gearing you, right? That's what's getting you to do everything. That is not intuition. Intuition quite often, at least personally for me, and I know we're probably going to go into how this is collectively. Personally for me, intuition is quite quiet. And it's having that conversation with yourself and not having immediate anxiety and immediate fear, just kind of knowing. That's what it's always been to me.
And then that brings us right back again to that crown chakra,
Yep.
because it's just that intuitive knowing, that divine knowledge, that claircognizance that comes directly from that crown chakra. So it does directly tie right back into, the moon and Mars and that kind of balance that we're talking about here. And
Yeah.
this is where, again, when we're talking about physical versus spiritual, that's another way to discern it. Is this a physical reaction or is this a spiritual reaction? And you will know the difference. You know the difference between physical and spiritual.
Hmm.
I can tell you that your body produces butterflies, but instinctually, not instinctually, intuitively, you know why those butterflies are there,
Yeah.
right? Your instincts produce those butterflies. Intuition produces the reason for the butterflies.
Yes. 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 1,000%. I agree, and I think it's it's really important to kind of come back and remember that while it's not the easiest thing in the world, I think that there's a lot of work that can be done for you to hear that intuition louder,
Yes.
because it wasn't immediate for me. Even, I mean, I know I was 15 when I started meditating, but it wasn't immediate for it to even come back after, years of not meditating or months of not meditating. I would still have moments of listening to something else. I went through I want to say 3 years of a relationship where I denied my intuition quite often, and another 3 years of being out of that relationship where I was still denying my intuition because I didn't realize that I needed to be back with spirit and back with my knowing and back with trusting myself. So it took a lot of work to get back in that place, a lot of consistent work. And I'm sure for you too, like it took a lot of consistency to really listen to yourself again.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, the same goes for my astrology, right? Because at one point, I mean, I had studied astrology from when I was in my teens, just like
Yeah.
you studied your energy work
Yeah,
and
I literally
meditation.
I literally always tell everyone, like, me and Corey, the reason why we're doing all this together is because we started at 15. Like, we started
Yes.
all this work when we were children.
Yes. Like we went through the shadow parts of
Separately.
ourselves when we were still children.
Mhm,
So along this journey, one of the things that I have realized is I need to trust my knowing
mhm,
within astrology as well. Because for a while I doubted my knowing in astrology, and then I doubted my intuition,
mhm.
and I doubted my intuitive knowing of astrology.
Yeah.
So then I stopped practicing it for a little bit.
Oof. Yeah.
And that was when I was, I was still in my teenage years, so I wasn't really taking it seriously. But when I got out of that relationship, when I started to really find myself again, when I started to do the meditating, when I started to do the work to reconnect with my higher self, that's when I
Mhm.
rediscovered astrology. And that's when I dove headfirst into it. Like I
Yeah.
was like, I'm going into it, I'm going all in. And it has now been 5 years since
Mhm.
I did the full dive into
Mhm.
astrology, professionally, and I'm now years beyond what I ever thought that I would be.
Yeah.
So my intuition led me back to my path.
Yeah. Yeah. 1,000%. And I agree. Yeah. I think I think for anyone listening, right? And you're wondering about your intuition and you're wondering if you are discerning it or if you are able to discern it, know that that takes time. And when you get on the path of listening to your intuition, you probably won't even know you're listening. You're just following what, to be honest, for me it was I'm following what spirit's telling me. And while I'm just going to go right back to psychology and spirituality, it's the same thing. while that is true, a lot of spirit is my higher self, and a lot of my higher self is my intuition. That is our crown chakra, right? And so you are all of those things are one. Those
Yeah.
all of those things are connected. And so to know that is to know yourself.
Yes.
And that being said, there are also very physical ways, right, to get back in tune with your intuition. It's not just guessing if this is your intuition or this is your trauma, right? Like, or your fear. There are actual tools, practical tools that we can put to work so that you have practice with your intuition, because we're not just saying this because, oh, we did. No, we meditated and we studied for for about 15 years going now, like, on and off, yes, but we studied for a long time, so, like, we still have to do the work even now. So yeah, I think we
Yeah.
should provide them with some of the things that we've done, you know
Yeah. One of the things, unfortunately for me, I'm hard-headed. I'm stubborn. Okay. If you're anything like me, if you're listening to this and you're anything like me, you learn lessons one way, and that's the hard way. And I'm gonna be honest, part of my journey with my intuition and learning was learning what wasn't my intuition.
Mm,
Learning by what I perceived to be failures of my intuition, but they weren't failures of my intuition. They were me not listening to my intuition. They were me not trusting my intuition. So in cases where I would say, okay, I don't know if this is my intuition or if this is my instinct, if this is, my gut trying to drive me in a certain place. He said, screw it. I'm going to flip a coin. I'm going to choose one of these things. I'm going to go for it. And if it doesn't end up being the right thing, I know that wasn't my intuition. And I know and I understand that feeling better. It helps me to discern that feeling better because your intuition, this is one of the biggest things that I've learned, your intuition will always guide you towards your best self. Your intuition will
yeah,
never guide you towards failing yourself. So if your choice between your instinct and your intuition is between one that serves you and one that depletes you, the one that serves you is your intuition.
yeah. Yes. Yes, 1,000%. I agree. And that's really important too, right? That's really important to know that, yeah, sometimes you're just hard headed and you don't want to do all the practical tools, And I don't mean you in general. I mean people. I mean,
In
sure, yeah,
general,
you,
yeah.
but but yes, that the it's it will come with practice, even if you don't intentionally mean to be practicing it. It's learning what is into your intuition. It's also, I think I can almost piggyback on what you're saying when I say at some point I got fed up with the fact that things weren't happening for my highest good, for my best self. At some point I realized I don't like this feeling and this road that I'm going down, and I know that I've been denying what I really want and what's really for me, and I've been attempting to please others and attempting to put others in front of me and not really listening to me, right? So then once I came to that realization that I was fed up, that is when I actively started using those practical tools. So I guess I can piggyback off of you a little bit, because yes, I was hard headed for a while until I was like, I don't want to do this to myself anymore. I
Right.
want to come back to self. I
Yeah.
want to come back to who I am. And I started to honestly, I'm gonna be real with you guys. I started to meditate a lot. And that is a big, important tool. While we don't all know how to meditate, it is important to sit with self in silence, if possible. Not your thoughts being silent, but the things around you being silent without distraction. Just so that you can really hear what your thoughts even are.
Yeah. Yeah. And another way that I connected with my intuition a little bit more, and this is a little bit, it's a different form of meditation, but it's not as if you're somebody who can't sit still, right?
Yeah.
If you're a movement type person, move with your intuition.
Mm,
Put on a song and just move. I'm talking free flow. I'm
mhm.
talking move your arms in the air, do 360, bend over, back, do whatever you need to do to freely move, right? Because that is training you to connect with that inner peace that just flows with what's going on around you. So
Yeah.
even if it's for 2.5 to 3 minutes, just while you just move around the room, even if you aren't doing extravagant movements, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
just flowing around the room, just kind of doing wacky waving inflatable tube band all over the room,
Mm-hmm.
that's still intuitive and intentional movement where
Yeah.
you're connecting with your intuition and flowing with the energy around you.
Yeah. Not just that, but our trauma lives in our hips. Just physically, we hold our trauma in our body. We hold our pain in our body. We hold our emotions in our body. Those things will bring up all of the things that you need to know about anything. I was saying this on uh live with other people that your chakras have different kinds of intuitions, right? Moving your body
Ooh,
is that sacral chakra energy. Moving your body intuitively is your sacral chakra taking over and telling you what is here, what is blocked, what are you not hearing, what do you not know. And that is your intuition within your sacral chakra telling you about yourself. So while you're moving, you'll have thoughts that come up, quite possibly, or at least your body will have that motion. And then once you're done with that motion, eventually you may have knowings come to you because you've now moved that energy up and through your body and out of you. This builds up intuition because it allows your mind to connect to your body in whatever way it needs to instead of you controlling what way it needs to, right?
yeah.
It brings you really back to present self.
Yeah. And I will say that your intuition is not always this happy-go-lucky thing either.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes your intuition is telling you that you need to process information, you need to
Yeah.
process emotions. And I say that because as we're talking about this, I recall a very specific time where I was doing that free flowing. I was in my room, I was in high school, I think it was a junior in high school. I was processing what was my perceived one of the worst periods of my life, my self-image periods. And it was in that moment during that free flow afterwards where I found myself just like heavy breathing.
Mhm.
And then that heavy breathing turned into me just sobbing.
Mm,
Right. And I could tell that was an intuitive release. That was something inside of me that I had not allowed myself to process prior, that I needed to move that energy within me and then allow my intuition to just let it flow and let it out, right? And part of that intuitive flow was I literally went from doing my dance around the room. All of a sudden, I found myself like literally on the ground with my hands on my knees, just like hyperventilating,
mm,
breathing, crying. And at first it started me just trying to catch my breath. And then I realized, oh, this is something else. This is
yeah,
my intuition is trying to get me to process something. And when I released, that's when I was able to actually release those emotions.
yeah, yeah. That's a real thing that lives in all of us.
It is.
It really is. It's that's a real thing. So yes, physical movement itself. And I just want to say, like, I think that we share quite often our personal experiences of like what we've had to go through and what we've had to deal with to recognize our intuition and hold space. I for a second first, I want to appreciate you for even talking about that, right? Because that is so significant. And then also for everyone listening, like these are moments that you may have run into, right? That and now you have sort of a word for it or a name for it and like an explanation and to know that like you're not alone in it. So it's super important to know that like you may have already been doing this. So if you have a moment where you were dancing and you broke down, I know I have. If you've had a moment where you were dancing and you just broke down out of nowhere, like that was you already significantly connecting to your intuition. So if you're wondering if you've ever done it before, there is a piece of confirmation there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Or
that's super
sometimes your
important.
intuition tells you something happened the day that it happened. I know multiple times now, and this is just an extreme case of it, multiple times now, people passed away.
Yes.
And the morning of them passing away, I just knew. I knew something was going to happen. Most
Mhm.
recently, my grandfather passed away, and I saw out of the corner of my eye as I was driving into work what I thought was a spider crawling up my window. But when I looked over, it was actually a hawk that was flying through the sky. And my intuition, literally at that moment, said, oh, that's grandpa transitioning because he was a worker in his lifetime. He created, much like a spider creates or spends most of its life creating a web over and over and over again.
Mhm. Yeah. You didn't.
And then for him to transition into a hawk with that flying, and then that same day he passed away. And sometimes
Yeah.
your intuition can tell you things before they even happen.
Yeah. I completely agree. I will say 1,001%. Like my significant other has stated before someone has passed that the day was going to be a not so good day every single time. He did not know what was happening, but he had pointed out in different ways, in so many words, that the day was not going to be so good. And
Yeah.
he, no idea how he knew that. He is not very spiritual in the sense that we can outwardly be spiritual, but he knew. And I always say his intuition is so interestingly intact because he's not as actively practicing as like we might be, but he's still doing it. And that's how I know, even if you are not necessarily in tune with spirits or in tune with, or you feel like you haven't gone through that, you are still tapping into your intuition no matter what. And it's it really in your own way. And I think that's really significant to know that it's always individual.
It is. I mean, even when you cook, like when people are out here cooking, they're just like, oh, I don't measure anything. I just season until my ancestors tell me to stop.
Is that your
Miss Ma'am, you're
intuition?
using your intuition.
Yep. Yep. But yes. So movement is super important. Meditation helps. Spending time in nature helps.
Yeah.
And let me tell you why. And this is something I learned listening to my own, favorite shows and reading my own favorite books. And maybe we'll bring those up another time. But um, nature in itself is what science considers perfect, right? It's perfect in all of its imperfections. Its frequencies are perfect. Even when you're looking at a tree that is wobbled and turned to the side, it's perfect, right? When you are out in nature, you do not look at a flower and say, that's not supposed to be there. Maybe you look at a weed like that, but you don't look at flowers and say that. You more often than not look at nature and say, this is beautiful. And it hasn't done anything. So being out in nature allows this room to just be, which allows the room to just listen, which allows the room to hear your intuition.
And I will say, on just connecting that to an even scientific level, right? We have known that the Fibonacci sequence is the code for beauty,
Yes.
right? It is the frequency of beauty. That is like a scientific, it is the Fibonacci sequence is encoded
Yep.
into art, it's encoded
Encoded
into
into everything.
creation,
DNA, it's encoded into everything. Yeah.
everything, even the way that plants and everything grows
Mm-hmm.
is connected to the Fibonacci
Yep.
sequence. You know what else is connected to the Fibonacci sequence?
Let me guess.
The
Something psychological.
the Venus star point in
Oh, I love
astrology.
that.
You know what else the Venus star point connects to?
Mm.
Your intuitive knowing about your path and how
Mm.
you connect to your intuitive path in this lifetime.
Mm.
So we see a direct
Yes.
correlation between the Fibonacci sequence and your ability to connect to your intuition about your path in this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's awesome. That's amazing. I even like putting that together is even amazing. Guys, go look up the Fibonacci sequence. You will actually love the connections, because when I looked it up, it like I had to stop because I was like, okay, I know everything is one, but like I don't need to see this right now.
It's
Uh,
mind blowing. It is mind
yes,
blowing, and it's
quite.
something that we can directly tie to spirituality and science. That's one of
Yeah.
those bridges between science and spirituality that exists just natively right in front of us. So if you're wondering, oh, what is our potential connection? Is there a scientific explanation? Because there are some people out there that are going to doubt intuition.
Mhm.
There have been times where I've been told, because I'm a male, my intuition isn't as strong, or I wouldn't be able to connect as much because intuition is only for women. That's
There's a
just
spiral staircase on my television right now. And the confirmation with the spiral staircase on my television right now is crazy.
with the
Because
Fibonacci
yeah,
sequence.
there's
Yeah.
literally right now just appeared on my TV a Google photo of a spiral staircase.
I love that. See, it's confirmation. It's
Yeah,
confirmation. Intuition is everywhere. Just as the Fibonacci sequence exists everywhere,
yeah,
so does intuition. Intuition and Fibonacci sequence are hand in hand together.
yeah.
They're intertwined into everything, just
Everything.
as we are.
Yeah, 1,000%. 1,000%. And you were saying like, yeah, people will you were saying deny uh intuition.
Yeah, well, a lot of people will deny
Yeah.
intuition just in general because they don't trust it. They don't want to believe it. They've been told that, they can't connect to it for some reason. They've been told that it's just some woo-woo spiritual mumbo jumbo. There's
Yes.
nothing real about it. There are a lot of people out there who don't believe in spirituality or don't believe in religion or anything of that nature, and who will tell you that intuition is just bogus, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, those are the same people who a month down the line will say, I don't know, I don't have something in my gut doesn't tell me this is right.
Yep.
They'll call it their gut feeling instead of calling it their instinct,
Yep.
right?
Their
It exists
intuition.
within
Yeah.
all of us, whether or not you accept it.
Yeah. 1,000%. I completely agree. I do want to say I think that we know, or I hope that you guys completely understand intuition in itself, and I do hope that you guys take on uh or take up these practical tools, the ones that we've given you so far. I have meditation is one of my biggest ones. Yours is just kind of knowing that you were fed up. And I know yours is meditation as well.
Spiritual movement, trial and error.
Yeah,
It's
spiritual movement as well. Trial and error, definitely. Okay, there
yeah,
we go. That's a better way to put it. And I want to say allowing yourself to again just be. I think more than anything, being present is extremely important. Just be present in the thoughts that you're having. I know we have a lot of racing thoughts, and there's many ways to be present in that. If you can't just do it, you can journal it, right? If you can't just be present, you can start writing things down. Intuition, the reason why we write things down is to kind of organize our thoughts and put them on paper so that we can sift through them on our own and be able to understand them. And a lot of the time when we're journaling, we end up writing what our intuition is thinking on the paper
yeah.
just because we're writing.
Yeah, and I feel like part of that comes from it ties back to that original thought that we, proposed earlier, where your intuition comes before that very first thought. So the
Yeah.
intuition is the feeling that comes before the thought. So when
Yeah.
we journal it down, we're able to clear all those thoughts that came out right after our intuition. We're able to clear those out of the way so that the intuition can actually step forward and take its place where it needs to be.
Yes, 1,000%. I think also it takes practice. It's not just something you're going to immediately know or get. It's something that you're going to have to start trusting yourself on. And
Yes.
trusting yourself means making simple decisions based on gut feelings. It means actually deciding on something. It means actually saying, you know what? I hear myself and I'm going to listen to myself,
Yes.
right? For a moment here. If I'm wrong, hey, I'm wrong. But it's not based off of, and it's, I want to say, and I want to distinguish this really like significantly, like intuition is, I don't know if it comes quietly to everyone, but it is that first. I think we say first mind a lot. It is that first knowing, not the one that causes you to go crazy, right? Not the one that causes you fear or anxiety, but it is that first knowing. So whenever you catch yourself having a second knowing just to think over that first knowing, if you catch yourself, go back to that first knowing
Yeah.
and acknowledge that it's there. You don't even have to do anything with it if you don't want to, but acknowledge it. That at least will help you begin to hear your intuition and know that it exists,
Yeah.
right? If and what I mean is if I'm talking to old me, it's when that man told me that he wasn't talking to a girl on his phone and I knew he was talking to a girl on his phone. It doesn't mean I have to do anything about the fact that he was talking to the girl on his phone, but in that moment I have to say, I know what I know.
Right.
And if I decide I'm going to ignore it, then I'm going to ignore it, but I know what I know, and just acknowledging that will allow you to start building a relationship with your intuition. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, moving into, I think we kind of covered a lot here, right?
Yeah.
I feel like we covered just what is important to know regarding your intuition. I feel like we covered the fact that it is seriously a valuable tool to get you through life, right? It's going to push you through no matter what you're doing. It will come up. I'm not going to say it's always going to come up every single second, right? But it will come up when necessary. And it is pattern recognition. It is very heavily involved in psychology. Psychologists do study intuition. Okay? So it's not woo woo. It's not like psychologists really do have studies on it. If you look them up, you will find them. I had to look
Yes.
them up before this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And
um
it's something, the analogy that I can put it in my brain, it's like if you have an alarm clock that every time that you hit stop or every time that you hit reset,
mhm,
the alarm got a little bit louder.
yeah.
And the first time that you hit that alarm, it's almost non-discernible. You have
Mhm,
to look, you have to find that alarm clock
mhm.
in order to hit that stop button for the first time. And then every time after that that you find that alarm clock and hit stop, it becomes louder and louder and louder until you simply can't ignore it one day.
Yeah. 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 Yes. Intuition gets louder, guys. I don't know if we said that in the beginning of this, but intuition will continue to speak to you. It will not stop speaking to you. A lot of the time, actually, and that was one of the biggest tests that I had to give myself recently, was I need I need to know if this is what I really want. And so instead of, asking a million other people, I would say, okay, I want a tattoo, right? Random tattoo. I'm just giving an example. Random tattoo. If I want the same tattoo in 3 months, then that's my intuition telling me go ahead and get it. Like if I change my mind, and you can give your intuition time. It doesn't have to be immediate reaction to an intuition. You don't have to do that. Your intuition's going to get louder, but you don't have to immediately react to it. One thing about spirituality in general is that they don't work on our time. So because they don't have time. So whenever you decide to listen is when you decide to listen,
Right.
right? So I 3 months later still wanted the same tattoo, so I got the tattoo and I've been happy with the tattoo since.
Yep.
But you can give yourself time to listen. Give yourself time for everything.
Yes. I mean, you used to do on TikTok, you used to do these intuition training exercises where you
Yes.
would pick a card, you
Mhm.
would show the back of the card, and you would have
Mhm.
everyone describe what they intuitively felt was on the other side of that card.
Yes.
And 9 times out of 10, they
They
could
had
pick up what
something.
was on the card.
Yes, that test, and we'll see who listens to this, but you still got to do this. I don't care if you want to do it or not. You're doing it on my lives. But that test, quite honestly, it doesn't ask you to be a psychic.
No.
No, it asks you to trust your first thoughts. Whether it's right or wrong, or whether we are right or wrong, it asks you to listen to yourself. That
Yes.
is what we're developing. We're not I'm not trying to teach you how to be a psychic. I'm trying to teach you how to believe in yourself, how to trust yourself, because that is what your intuition is. And more often than not, you'll find yourself in a place where you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And intuition is ultimately, at the end of the day, our higher selves directly communicating with us. That's ultimate, that's simply put it. That's how I see it. It's our highest self attempting to communicate with us. And
Yep.
if you choose to ignore your intuition, you actively choose to ignore your higher self.
You actively choose to ignore your whole self.
Yes.
Higher, you, lower, you're ignoring all of it. I
Yes.
completely agree. It is your higher self 1,000%. But your higher self is what? Your higher self is telling you that is telling you what to do to help you.
Yes.
In general. So yes, I agree 1,000%. But yes, your intuition is your higher self.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's essential.
Yeah.
Balancing intuition with your logic is super important.
It is. And I will say, I don't think I have anything more that I want to go into.
No.
So if you guys have any, forms of intuition, how you connect with your intuition, definitely leave that in the comments. How do you connect with your intuition? What are some ways that you do it? What are some new practices that you might have thought of that you can
Yeah.
share with others? If you're practicing something new, come back in a couple of weeks and drop that down here so somebody who is finding it can potentially go in and try that new practice themselves too. So share that with us so maybe we can actually learn about it
Yeah.
ourselves too.
1,000%. And yeah, share your stories as well. Like if you have any specific stories where you've denied your intuition or you've noticed, even like thinking about it while we were talking, if you've noticed that your intuition has built or you've completely lost it, share that with us because I think there will be, moments where we can jump in and respond to you or someone can and help you through that as well.
Yeah, or even somebody who might just be in the same boat as you and can just resonate and you can just find a community of people that potentially are experiencing the same thing as you during
Yes.
that time. So,
Yes. 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 Okay. Well, I think that was a great conversation.
yeah.
We do want to say that next time we come back to recording, we will be having a really fun conversation on getting working with our deities or working with deities in general because I don't know if I have specific ones, but working with them in general, how a deity definitely helps me work with my intuition. So there's a
Yeah,
little
and
segue for you.
yeah, and how we can even identify deities, what they are,
Hmm.
and how you can begin to work with them and if you're looking to work with them, and how
A
to
thousand
notice
percent.
if a deity is reaching out to you as well.
Yes, 1,000%. All right, guys. If you haven't already, please, please, please remember to subscribe to our podcast. Even if you don't want to talk about your intuition, leave a review. Tell us what you think about what we said today. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. We want to hear it all. We love constructive criticism. Okay, if you're being mean, we well, we'll let our fans do something about that.
Also, remember if you haven't already to follow our YouTube, our Instagram, and our Spotify. That way, there you don't miss any content that we miss, as well as any circles or any events that we may be hosting, as well as we do have some upcoming things, such as circles, as well as potential other monthly services that we will potentially be offering within the coming months as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Until next time, y'all.
This has been Soul Guide Society. I'm Larina Aligned, and you can find me at larina.aligned on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
And I'm Pathway Light by Corey, and you can find me at pathwaylightbycorey.com. We thank you for walking the path to alignment with us.
Till next time.